Hey, it's Dr. John Terry, the Black Belt Leader, and welcome to the Black Belt Leadership Podcast, where each week I'm giving you tips, tools, insights, and resources to help you become a better version of who you are and what you do as you discover, develop, and deploy your own Black Belt leader within. I want to open this week's podcast with a very simple question. Did you ever play with wooden blocks? You know what I'm talking about. The alphabet wooden blocks that millions of families just like mine have used throughout history to help teach their children important skills. Using those alphabet blocks, my sister and I learned to recognize letters. We learned to recognize colors. We learned to recognize numbers. And we learned to put those letters together to form words. We also develop critical motor skills as we learn to stack those blocks and make different shapes out of the blocks. That, if you're remembering those as I do, kind of takes you on a walk down memory lane. But do you know the history of the alphabet block? Well, I didn't. So I did some research, and here's what I found. The humble origins of the alphabet block can be traced all the way back to the 16th century. English author and inventor Sir Hugh Platt described alphabet blocks in a 1954 work of classic literature called The Jewel House of Art and Nature. Now, John Locke, who was considered by many to be one of the most influential thinkers of the 17th century Enlightenment period, he was also a philosopher and a physician. He suggested in his book, Some Thoughts Concerning Education, that he wrote in 1693, that the use of alphabet blocks would make learning to read more enjoyable. In fact, this is what he said. There may be dice and playthings with letters on them to teach children the alphabet by playing. And 20 other ways may be found suitable to their particular tempers to make this kind of learning a sport to them. Now, a character I'd never heard of until I did this research was Frederick Wilhelm Froebel. In 1837, Froebel introduced a series of geometric blocks, all carved from wood, which he called Froebel's gifts. Now, Froebel was a German pedagogue. That means he was a very strict teacher who laid the foundation of what today we would call the kindergarten movement, based upon the unique recognition that every child has unique needs and capabilities. He believed that children are inherently creative and that kids could best learn through playing and hands-on learning experiences. Now, Froebel went on to establish the very first kindergarten. That word actually means garden of children, and he formed the very first kindergarten in Blankenburg, Germany in 1837. As part of the curriculum, he introduced the use of educational materials, which included a series of play objects, very simple shapes and forms, and the concept was to teach basic concepts of math, geometry, and understanding through hands-on creative play. Children were encouraged to engage in exploration and creativity in utilizing these pieces to put them together to form different shapes and different things that they could then play with and learn as they did. What he found is working with these little small objects, differing in size, it helped the children develop fine motor skills. And at the same time, they were learning the rudiments of geometry and mathematics in the process. Now, fast forward a little bit further on into 1870, Milton Bradley. Yes, the Milton Bradley, known for some of the most incredible games that have spanned generations. Milton Bradley created a set of building blocks based on Froebel's work. He called it Bradley's Original Kindergarten Alphabet and Building Blocks. Now, like Froebel's gifts, the blocks came in a variety of geometric sizes, but Bradley did something unique. He added letters and numbers to the blocks. Now, this may seem like an insignificant addition to what Froebel had developed, but it literally changed what was a creative tool for building into a didactic learning tool that forever changed the educational landscape in homes and classrooms around the world. Now, Samuel L. Hill went on to become the very first American manufacturer to actually mass produce alphabet blocks. He obtained a patent for his wooden blocks with letters in 1867. His Brooklyn plant mass produced his alphabet blocks as an early education and learning tool. So between Milton Bradley and Samuel Hill, the quintessential alphabet block had gone from a small plaything into a mainstream educational tool. Alphabet blocks were now available to the masses. Now, one other contributor I want to point out is Adeline Dutton Train Whitney. She patented an early alphabet block system in 1882, and through her work, significantly expanded how alphabet blocks were used in education, not only with children, but with adults who struggled to read. Today, children learn and play with ABC blocks, the alphabet blocks that began all the way back in the 1500s. What do they do today? They take these blocks and they stack them. They sort them. They spell with them. They learn numbers with them. They socialize as they play with their friends and their neighbors and their brothers and their sisters. And sometimes when they leave them laying around on the floor, they stumble over them. And that leads me to today's life lesson on the wooden alphabet block. I'm talking about stumbling blocks. Now, stumbling blocks are obstacles or hindrances that prevent our progress. Stumbling blocks can impede our understanding, and they can prohibit consensus or agreement. Stumbling blocks make it difficult for us to move forward, makes it difficult for us to achieve progress when we constantly find ourselves on the ground having to pick ourselves up. And stumbling blocks can cause us to struggle to achieve goals or objectives. Now, by definition, a stumbling block is an obstacle, a barrier, or a hurdle, or an implement that constrains forward momentum. Today, we use that as a figurative way to describe what gets in our way, the things that cause us to stumble and to fall. Now, the term stumbling block, interestingly enough, has been around for most of human history. One of the first recorded uses of the word stumbling block is actually found in the Torah and in the Old Testament. If you go into the book of Leviticus, in the book of Leviticus, it warns us against putting up a mixel, Hebrew for a stumbling block, in front of someone who was blind. Later on, we see the Greeks pick up and use the word stumbling block, in the Greek, scandalon, which is the form of the word from which we get the English word scandal. Now, when we go back and look at the earliest uses in the English language, the stumbling block appeared around 1520. It was originally meant to describe a tree stump over which someone trips. Duh. A stumbling block and a tree stump over which someone slips. But today, it's figuratively used to describe any obstacle or any hindrance to our progress or to our success. Now, stumbling blocks are considered bad for a reason. Why? They refer to something that may hinder or obstruct our progress, that may impede our understanding, or cause us to falter or fail. Now, some of the common examples of stumbling blocks, other than the physical ones that we may run into, could include our personal beliefs, our personal biases, a lack of resources or a lack of education, a lack of money, our habits or our vices, rules and regulations. Politics can become a stumbling block. Other people can become a stumbling block, and a failure to think can also be a stumbling block. Now, there's probably many more, and of those many more, some are going to be unique to each and every one of us because we all have our own stumbling blocks that we often put in our own way. They cause us to trip up, they cause us to fall, they cause us to stumble, and they impede our ability to move forward. Now, if you think about it, these faux pas that we experience through the stumbling blocks we often put in our own way can be embarrassing, and at times they can be very humiliating. But if we embrace them as inevitable and unavoidable, and there's nothing we can do about it, guess what? Those stumbling blocks end up limiting our thinking, stifling our progress, and ultimately leave us scarred, marred, and scared to move forward. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hate to tell you, but this is not a recipe for success. As I was thinking about alphabet blocks as I was flying home from a trip to Pennsylvania, I remembered playing with alphabet blocks as a kid. My sister and I would spend hours on the floor playing with blocks. We would arrange them, we would build with them, we'd have contests to see who could stack the blocks the highest before they fell over. Now, my parents would use them to teach us letters, to teach us numbers, and to help with color recognition. And they also worked with us to be able to assemble those blocks in sequences so that the letters actually formed words. But there is a downside to those alphabet blocks because if you didn't pick them up and you later came running through the den or down the hallway where you'd been playing, it was quite easy to step on a block, take a tumble, and crash into the wall or fall into the floor. Well, even worse than that was to not pick the blocks up and then have one of your parents step on a wooden block and stumble, trip, or fall or bruise their foot if they were walking around without shoes. That you didn't want to have happen. One of the early things I discovered about alphabet blocks was not only could I learn from them and could I stack them, but those alphabet blocks were sturdy. They could withstand my weight when I stood on them. I mean, after all, they're made out of solid wood. And I learned if I could stack them very carefully, making a base a few blocks high and several blocks wide, I could reach things on the kitchen counter, like the cookie jar, that I couldn't otherwise reach, even if I was standing on my tiptoes. So think about that. The blocks that could cause me to stumble and fall, I could also use as a stepping stone or a stepping block to help me reach the places I couldn't reach on my own. Now, think about the lesson that teaches us right there. What might be a stumbling block for you may not be a stumbling block for someone else. And what might be a stumbling block for you, if used in a new and different way, might actually become a stepping block to let you reach places you haven't been able to reach before. How we use the blocks before us makes all the difference. Let me say that again. What may be a stumbling block could be a stepping stone or a stepping block to help us get to places we've never been able to get before and to reach places we've never been able to reach before, but how we use the blocks before us makes all the difference in the world. So here's my question. Are you stumbling because of the limitations in your life, the stumbling blocks you've put in your own way, or are you using those blocks? Are you building upon them to remove the limitations in your life that are holding you back from reaching your potential? So to turn stumbling blocks into stacking blocks so you can reach the places you couldn't reach before, you need to do 4 simple things. And let me give you those real quickly. Number 1, you want to reframe your perspective. If you see a stumbling block as nothing more than a stumbling block, that's all it's ever going to be to you. But if you start seeing obstacles as opportunities and you reframe how you see that stumbling block as an opportunity to turn that into a stepping stone or a step upon which you can reach higher, it's an opportunity to learn and grow. I talk about that often in the podcast, the importance of maintaining a lifestyle of personal growth and development. So when you see the stumbling blocks in your life, what do you need to do? You need to shift your perspective to see the situation in a positive light. How do I take the negative and turn it into a positive? Remember, a setback is only temporary unless you choose to stop moving forward. A block may trip you up, and if it does, it's okay as long as you get back up and keep moving forward and figure out what caused you to trip in the first place and remove that obstacle from your life. Now, the second thing you need to do is you've got to learn from your mistakes. You got to acknowledge you made a mistake. You got to acknowledge you put that stumbling block in your own way, which we often do many times. You got to acknowledge it's there, and you got to do something to move it out of the way. That's the process of learning. We need to see each failure as a step toward success. I've talked many times about Thomas Edison and the fact that he failed 10,000 times before he invented the incandescent light bulb. He kept moving those stumbling blocks out of the way again and again and again until he finally succeeded. What do? You identify something that doesn't work. You learn from it. You don't repeat it, and then you try something else. That's the process of learning. It's the process of scientific discovery. It's the possibility of realizing what could be when we stop doing what we know doesn't work. So we use our mistakes to try something new, to try something innovative, to come up with a way to accomplish something up to this point we haven't been able to accomplish. Now, the third thing you need to do to turn a stumbling block into a stepping stone or a stepping block that can elevate you and elevate your potential, you got to build a support network. You want to connect with other people. I'm talking about positive people who can help you work through the challenges that you're facing right now. Maybe they've been there themselves and they can offer guidance and advice from what they learned when they went through the very same thing. Building a support network means you probably need to, and I won't say probably, you should hire a mentor or a coach, or at a minimum, have a supportive friend who's going to be there to encourage you and to be a positive influence in your life. Now, whether it's a coach or a mentor or a supportive friend, you want to seek out other people who have life experience that you don't yet have, who have skills you're wanting to develop that have mastered those skills, and they're willing to share with you, they're willing to teach you. When you're working with a mentor, a coach, or a supportive friend, you can learn from their wisdom, their insight, and their experience. And what I like about working with a coach or a mentor, you can learn the lessons they learn from success, but also from their failures without having to go through what they went through to learn the lesson from failure. That's accelerating your learning that moves you faster towards success in your life. Now, the fourth and last thing you've got to do to turn a stumbling block into a stepping block that can elevate your reach and your opportunity is you've got to address your limiting beliefs. Now, Albert Einstein famously said that you and I can't solve the problems we face with the same level of thinking that we use to create those problems in the first place. That means the same thinking that created the stumbling block we put in our own way has to be elevated to think in a new and different way to figure out how to turn that stumbling block into a stepping stone or a stacking block. So to be able to turn a stumbling block into a stacking block, to be able to reach higher and to reach farther, what have you got to do? Stretch your thinking. Again, this is something I talk about often in the podcast, is elevating the quality of our thinking. Remember, you can't outperform the quality of thinking you bring to any task. So if you want to be better at saying, doing, and becoming, it starts with becoming a better thinker. So how do you do that? Well, you got to be very clear on your goals. You got to be very clear on your objectives, and you got to challenge your limiting beliefs, and you got to acknowledge and challenge and learn to overcome the fears that are holding you back. You've got to cultivate a mindset of resilience and optimism if you want to turn a stumbling block into a stacking block that allows you to elevate your reach and to grasp the things that right now are just out of your reach. So as I get ready to wrap up today's teaching, let me share a spoiler alert. You probably already figured it out. You and I, we're all going to experience stumbling blocks at some point in our lives, and probably more than once. And remember, many of these stumbling blocks are of our own making. Now, some come from other people, and some come from politics and rules and regulations, and those are sometimes beyond our control. But the stumbling blocks that we put in our own way, those are easy to remove if we just pay attention to the fact that they're there and pick them up and address them and get them out of the way. But understand this, if you do stumble and fall, it's okay, as long as you get back up, learn why that happened, and make the steps that you never repeat it again. But there's some good news, and let me leave you with this. The very same blocks that can cause you to stumble, can cause you to fall, can also be repurposed and used to help you reach new heights that you were never able to achieve. Those very same blocks that cause you to stumble and fall can be repurposed to create the steps that elevate you to reach and achieve things that were just outside of your reach, just outside of the grasp of your fingers. And now, because you've taken those stumbling blocks and repurposed them, learned the lessons they're teaching you, and stepped on them to step up to your full potential, those things that you wanted are now within your grasp. This is the life lesson of the quintessential wooden alphabet block. So let me leave you with a comment and a question that I posed earlier. What might be a stumbling block for one person may not be for another. And what might be a stumbling block to you could be your very next stepping block to be able to step up on to get to the very next level of growing into your full potential. How we use the blocks before us make all the difference in the world. So here's my question, and let me leave you with this. Are you stumbling because of the limitations in your life, or are you building upon them to remove those limitations that are holding you back from achieving your full potential? Hey, I'm Dr. John Terry, the Black Belt Leader. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day.